In a small town in 1830s England, an unmarried woman sought refuge in a parish workhouse. She gave birth to a boy, kissed him once, and died, leaving the child entirely unprotected from the harsh laws governing the poor. Mr. Bumble, the parish beadle, gave the boy a name, Oliver Twist, and promptly sent him to a branch workhouse. For 9 years, Oliver lived under the care of Mrs. Mann. She receives a modest weekly stipend from the parish to feed and clothe the orphans in her care. Instead, she pockets the majority of the money for herself, leaving the children to endure near starvation. The boys eventually become so desperately hungry that they hold a council and draw straws. The loser has to ask the workhouse master for an extra portion of thin gruel. The task falls to 9-year-old Oliver, who steps forward, bowl in hand, and utters the famous words, "Please, sir, I want some more." To the workhouse board, a child asking for more food was a dangerous sign of rebellion. They treated Oliver like a criminal, locking him away, and posting a notice on the gate offering £5 to anyone willing to take him as an apprentice. Oliver was sold to Mr. Sowerberry, the local undertaker. His new life involved sleeping on the floor of the funeral parlor among the coffins and being fed cold scraps that even the family dog had turned away. He was also targeted by Noah Claypole, an older, jealous apprentice. Noah looked down on Oliver because Oliver was a workhouse brat with no known parents, and he spent his days bullying the smaller boy to assert his own status. The bullying reached a breaking point when Noah insulted the memory of Oliver's dead mother. Despite being scrawny and outnumbered, Oliver snapped. He grabbed the older boy and tackled him to the ground, a rare moment of fury from a child who had otherwise spent his life in submission. The Sowerberrys responded by locking Oliver in a cellar and beating him. Lying in the dark, bruised, and realizing his life would only be violence, Oliver decided to run. At dawn, Oliver slipped away. He headed for London, a city he had heard was so vast that even a parish beadle like Mr. Bumble could never find him. He had 70 miles to walk on foot, with no food and no money, moving toward a city he knew nothing about. Exhausted and starving after his journey, Oliver reached the outskirts of London. There, he met Jack Dawkins, the Artful Dodger, who promised him that a respectable old gentleman would provide him with food and a place to stay for nothing. The Dodger led him to a hideout run by Fagin, where Oliver was given a hot meal and a place by a fire. To a boy who had been beaten and starved by official institutions, Fagin's den seemed like a sanctuary. However, Fagin was a career criminal who trained children to be pickpockets. Oliver, completely naive, watched the boys practice games with Fagin's pockets, never realizing he was being groomed for a life of crime. By accepting Fagin's food and shelter, Oliver had traded the cold cruelty of the workhouse for the calculated exploitation of the London underworld. He was now part of a criminal ring, though he didn't yet understand what that meant. Eventually, Fagin sent Oliver out with the Dodger and Charlie Bates to see how they worked. They moved through the crowded streets of Clerkenwell, looking for a target. Oliver watched in shock as the Dodger smoothly lifted a silk handkerchief from a man reading at a bookstall. At that moment, the reality of Fagin's trade finally became clear to him. Oliver ran away in a panic, which led the victim and the crowd to assume he was the thief. The thief chase ended with Oliver being violently tackled and taken into custody, despite having done nothing but stand by in horror. The victim, Mr. Brownlow, realized the boy was innocent. Seeing Oliver's poor health, he took him into his home, providing the first real kindness he had experienced. But the gang couldn't let him go. Fagin feared Oliver would inform on them. He sent Nancy and the brutal Bill Sikes to find him. They ambushed Oliver in the street and forcibly dragged him back to the slums. This violent recapture served as a reminder of Oliver's precarious position. His short time at Mr. Brownlow's had been a result of a stranger's chance intervention, but he was now back under the physical control of Sikes and Fagin, with no clear way to escape. To make Oliver one of them, Bill Sikes forced the boy to assist in an armed robbery. Sikes made it clear, if Oliver didn't cooperate, he would be killed. Sikes lifted Oliver and pushed him through a tiny window, ordering him to go through the house and open the front door. The plan failed almost immediately. The residents were armed and waiting. A shot rang out, hitting Oliver in the arm. Sikes grabbed the wounded boy and fled, but eventually left him bleeding in a ditch to avoid being caught. Although wounded, this failure ended up being Oliver's path to safety. The criminals had abandoned him, and the family he had been forced to rob took pity on him rather than turning him in. Back in London, Mr. Brownlow continued to investigate Oliver's origins. He eventually confronted a man known as Monks, who had been seen meeting with Fagin. The investigation revealed a hidden connection. Monks was Edward Leigh Ford, Oliver's half-brother. Monks had spent years trying to destroy Oliver. He had destroyed their father's will and paid Fagin to turn Oliver into a common thief, all to ensure that Oliver would never be able to claim his share of their father's inheritance. The truth eventually dismantled the gang. Monks was forced to confess, Fagin was arrested, and even Mr. Bumble ended up losing his position after his role in hiding Oliver's birth records was exposed. Oliver's story concludes with him being legally adopted by Mr. Brownlow. He received a portion of his inheritance and settled into a life far removed from the workhouses and the slums. He had survived the institutional neglect and criminal violence of Victorian London to finally find a home.